joining us here. And you have some questions. I am going to have everybody muted to keep the audio quality as good as we can get it. If you are living in the Dallas area, you know that there was some storms that came through. The internet's out in many places. In fact, we actually can't make a call here from where we're hosting this webinar. So we're on cell phones. We're going to do the best that we can here, and I thank you for your patience in this. If you do have a question, use the chat feature on the right. We're going to get started here in about 1 minute. Tonight's plan is to go for about 40 minutes. We're going to cover some really interesting conversations, and if you did just join us, this is the first of 3 webinars that we're going to be doing on 3 consecutive Monday nights. All 3 will be covering the topic of Alzheimer's disease. You may know a lot about it. You may know nothing about Alzheimer's. One thing will be sure, you will be well informed and well equipped to actually fight this disease, and we're going to be talking about that in a second. So at 7:01, we're just going to go ahead and get the show started here. I'm Steve Foss. We're going to go here for about 40 minutes. We're going to talk about Alzheimer's disease. And if you can see the screen here, or if you have any problems at all, just chat us in and let us know what's going on. Why should we talk about Alzheimer's disease? Why is it a topic that needs to be discussed? Well, I've got a couple of statistics for you. Is Alzheimer's disease study important? You may or may not know this, but as many as 5.1 million Americans may have it. In fact, somebody in the United States develops Alzheimer's disease every 67 seconds, and that's just in this country. In 2010, there were 36.6 million people worldwide with Alzheimer's disease, and it's predicted to affect 1 in 85 people globally by the year 2050. So what about cost? The cost of Alzheimer's disease care, and this is not only the medical part of it, this is in-home care. It's about $220 billion per year, and it's rising as the population ages. As baby boomers get older and they get in that target, the target for the disease, the costs are going to increase. So this is a really big deal, and this is something that can be avoided, and that's one of the reasons why we are having this webinar. Now, I'm going to be interviewing one of the specialists, one of the specialists in this field. Our guest who's on tonight, Danielle Girdano, is on a lot of advisory boards. You may know the Cooper Institute. Cooper Institute is well known for all of their cardiovascular type research. Let me get somebody muted here. Thank you. She's on the advisory board of cardiovascular wellness in Chicago. Even the first responders for fitness, she's on the medical advisory board there. Lots of honors we can talk about, but I don't want to take all the time. Here's a couple that are noteworthy. She was named the 2013 Top 40 Under 40 by the Dallas Business Journal. She's a finalist in the Chicago Innovation Awards for 2013. She is on the advisory board at St. Jude Research Hospital and the Sunday of Hope Project. You may know her from her company, Define Sculpting and Nutrition, LLC. She is the president and the founder of that. She's also on the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Cure Foundation. We are really lucky to have her. Welcome, Danielle. Danielle, can you hear us?
Oh, hello, hello. I sure can. Can you guys hear me?
Trying to clean our audio up here. Thank you, guys, if you're just coming in. Danielle, welcome tonight.
Well, hello, hello, hello. This is definitely a topic that I'm passionate about.
Why are you passionate about it? Just out of curiosity.
Well, you know, until you're actually affected with this disease or you have a family member who's affected by this disease, you really, you can't comprehend how devastating it is, and you can't comprehend how it pieces away a person's dignity, and it's a very, very painful, very, very long goodbye process, especially for the family. And you know, dementia runs in my family, and it's something I'm very cognizant of. And it's, as we're going to talk about, there's several preventable steps that people can take to really help slow the progression of this if they have been diagnosed with a form of dementia, particularly Alzheimer's, and really to not get themselves in that situation to begin with. We're going to talk about a couple of studies, which I get very excited about studies. I'm the geek, and I always say geeks are going to rule the world, but there's a great study from Harvard that came out, and then one that we're going to talk about from the American Heart Association as well. And that's good because it brings credibility to this issue and to the people who truly need the help and desperately trying to find a cure for this disease.
Excellent. Well, let's just get right into the content, if you don't mind. And the first question I want to ask you, because this is kind of a myth buster, so to speak. You know, Alzheimer's disease, it's always been known as a neurological issue. So what is the evidence that they're actually to support that it is a vascular disease?
Well, and you know, you're so right. When people think of Alzheimer's or they think of dementia in general, they think of a neurological disorder. Thinking of it as a vascular or cardiovascular topic or issue is just not something that people first think of. But, you know, first and foremost, what you need to understand is the brain cells need a good supply of blood to function properly and to be healthy. Blood is delivered through blood vessels, basically called the vascular system, which, you know, most people think, oh, vascular system, heart, lungs, carotid, aorta, that's normally the things that come to their head. But you have to understand that there's an extremely delicate and intricate pattern and system within the actual brain itself. And, you know, the cardiovascular system of the head and neck includes the vital arteries that provide oxygenated blood to the brain in the organs of the head. Now, this is also going to include like the eyes, different functions of the mouth. You know, all the veins that basically return the deoxygenated, blood from these organs back to the heart. And they have very unique properties to them, slightly different from the traditional cardiovascular system that, you know, like the heart or the lungs or the main artery system within the torso of the body. There are special properties to the ones that are in the head. And, you know, the brain has to have a continuous flow of blood. I mean, one of the very first things, if somebody has a brain trauma or is in an accident, the very first thing that doctors are normally concerned with is getting, you know, brain damage. They want to prevent brain damage. They want to continue to keep the heart pumping if somebody stops breathing. That's their immediate first function, is to get that going. And, you know, not many people know it, but the human brain, the metabolic activity that the human brain facilitates is amazing. It actually uses 20% of all the oxygen in the entire body and the glucose that's taken in by the body every single day. And when you think about that, it really kind of puts things in perspective. And so, you know, thinking of, you know, Alzheimer's or thinking of dementia as a vascular disease, once you really understand the structure, starts to make a whole lot of sense. It really starts to make a whole lot of sense. And several years ago, you know, there was an official classification of what was called vascular dementia. And vascular dementia, several different types, but really the main ones that people will probably relate to are stroke-related dementia. This is basically when the blood supply is cut off to the brain very suddenly, or there's an interruption in the blood supply. Now, this is something that will cause permanent damage. You know, there's also something that's called mixed dementia. And mixed dementia is kind of where that crossover starts to happen between an abrupt stoppage of blood flow or oxygen and crossing over into Alzheimer's disease, which is a slower progression of the deterioration and the death, really, of the brain cells. And so keeping oxygen to the brain is just, it's vital. It's absolutely vital. And we're going to talk a little bit about endothelial cells here in a second. So.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of people have wondered, what is endothelium? Obviously, it's not an 80s new wave band, but we know that it's very important as far as cardiovascular health goes. Tell us a little bit about endothelium cells within the brain and how they relate to Alzheimer's disease.
Well, and you know, you have to understand that endothelial cells are throughout the entire cardiovascular system. It's not just within the brain. There are some specific functions within the brain, but you know, nobody even knew that endothelial cells really existed until the mid to late, 90s. You might have heard of a very popular drug called Viagra. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh yeah.
And most men.
Well, I didn't mean it to come out that creepy when I said, "Oh yeah," but yes, we have heard.
Well, you know, most people, you know, they've heard of that, and the reason why that drug was so popular is it increased circulation, and the stem of that research and the root of that research got down to the discovery of the endothelial cells. Now, this is a one-cell thick layer of tissue that is inside of every artery, every capillary. If your body carries blood, it's going to have a layer of endothelium cells on the inside of it. And so when you think of how many arteries you have and how many yards and feet, and you have to excuse me, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but just the vast length of arteries and pathways that have this one cell layer deep organ really in the body, it's fascinating. And really the main purpose of that is to keep the blood oxygenated, is to get nitric oxide into the blood system so that the body is able to carry more nutrients. The body is able to work more efficiently, and the body therefore is able to operate at a much more efficient level, and is able to carry out more functions. And that includes the cells that are in the brains, or excuse me, in your brain. And people, I think, tend to forget how important these little guys are. Not many people know them to begin with, but they're extremely important, especially when you're talking about the functions of the brain, the amount of oxygen the brain uses, the amount of glucose that the brain uses. It's astonishing, and it's critical that this particular organ stays healthy, and this particular organ stays at a very high functioning level within the brain, within the whole body, but within the brain in particular.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you just joined us, a lot of people have come in a little bit late here. We're talking about Alzheimer's disease tonight. And we're talking about a startling revelation that this may not be strictly a neurological disease, that it is a vascular disease. And if it is a vascular disease, then it can be treated and it can be prevented. We're speaking with Danielle Girdano, the president of Define Your Health, Sculpting and Nutrition. And she's kind of an expert which has a personal stake in this disease. Would you say that? Would that be fair, Danielle?
Yeah, that would definitely be fair. I've seen the disease progress. I've seen what the disease can do to someone suffering from it, and you know, I'm very cognizant myself that that's something that is, you know, in my family history, and I actively take steps to protect myself against it.
Well, I've got an interesting slide up here that says your brain loves the gym. Here's what I would like to ask you about that. What key role does cardiovascular exercise play as far as its relationship to Alzheimer's disease?
Well, first of all, we've already established that the brain is part of the vascular system, right? We've established the fact that this very intricate network of vessels within inside the brain is very important to keep oxygen flowing to the brain. And we've also established that there is a one-cell layer thick organ called the endothelium, which is a crucial part of keeping those cells functioning and keeping oxygen levels and keeping nutrients flowing to the brain. And there's a lot of great reasons why the brain loves the gym. But the one that I specifically want to draw folks' attention to is the third one down in the right-hand side. It says blood flow to the brain increases, delivering more oxygen and improving waste removal. This is key. This is absolutely key, because we know that if the brain does not have oxygen, it will cease to function. We know that cells will die we know that brain cells, once brain cells are dead, they don't regenerate. It's not like red blood cells or skin cells or different types of cells in the body that regenerate. They're very precious, they're very delicate, and getting oxygen to them and keeping oxygen to them is very important. Transversely, when you sleep at night, your brain actually detoxifies. This is a proven fact. There's several studies, none of which we're going to particularly go over this evening, but as I always say, Google me when I'm giving my presentations. If you Google how toxins are released in the brain when you sleep, it's amazing. It's amazing how the brain detoxifies. And if you don't have a good oxygen supply to the brain, your brain can't detoxify. If your brain does not detoxify, there's several different toxins that build up in the brain, some of which are classified as sticky plaques and some of which are different classifications of toxins. But the long and short of the story is it's not just for proper functioning while you're awake, it's for long-term longevity of those cells, and keeping those cells as absolutely healthy as you can, and making sure that those cells have as much support that you can possibly give them. So although there's wonderful, wonderful things that, that come from the brain when you do exercise, and that's any type of exercise, none in particular, just getting increased oxygen, getting the heart pumping, getting the body moving, that's the one that I really want to draw attention to on this particular screen.
Well, Danielle, let me ask you something here, because obviously we spend a lot of time in the gym. We're very concerned with the size of our biceps and the way that we look. Why don't we spend more time exercising our brain?
Well, you know, I think it's one of those things that people take for granted, if you really want me to be honest. You know, even when you're talking about exercise, and I know that one of the parts of this series we're going to talk specifically about the role of exercise, but doing cognitive forms of exercise. And what do I mean by that? I mean getting on the treadmill and walking sideways, walking backwards, flipping around. I mean trying to, you know, do different functions. If you do lift weights, flip your grip around, you know, that type of thing. It's all about really getting that, getting those cells to not only function, but function at a very high level. Tangles are something that I know that we're going to talk about in this series as well too. And tangles are very important because those are pathways. And when we talk about anaerobic forms of exercise, the coordination of the central nervous system, which I know we're going to talk about here in just a second, but the central nervous system, that is your brain and your spinal cord. I mean, that is the thousands and thousands of signals that are sent. You know, the average person makes about 80,000 decisions every single day. The average person, not somebody who is specifically, you know, going to school or has a high intellectual, you know, position per se, where we might think they're using their brain a lot, but the actual everyday person.
Well, it's interesting that we have gone to the central nervous system here, because you mentioned the brain, you mentioned the spinal cord. There is an American Heart Association 1999 study. Do you want to talk about that?
You know what, I love this study. It's one of those studies that I think it's buried sometimes because, you know, people, if you're not looking for it, sometimes it does not pop up. But it deals specifically with the role of endothelium and what kind of partnership really there is between that central nervous system getting oxygen into the brain and the role of the endothelium itself. And you know, and you have to understand that this study really concentrated on the long-term effects of specifically cardiovascular exercise on endothelium cell function, or the dysfunction of which. Now, the average American certainly does not get the type of exercise or the movement that they should, not even what's recommended, but that they should. And this was the first study who really took a hard look at this and what role cardiovascular exercise had on it. And you know, basically the long and short of it is they found that long-term physical activity, and this is specific cardiovascular activity. This isn't, you know, anaerobic activity, even though anaerobic activity definitely has a role to play. in the prevention of Alzheimer's disease, but specifically cardiovascular exercise and the increase of nitric oxide. And you know, I know we're going to, you know, a couple more slides from now, we're going to specifically talk about nitric oxide, but it is so important because they found that it increased the oxygen. The oxygen saturation was much, much fuller. The overall functioning of the vascular system was much, much higher. And this was the first study who came out and that really solidified that prevention was key. And, you know, you might say, well, you know, of course, we always knew, you know, get up and move. I mean, you know, I'm on the advisory board for the Cooper Institute, and, you know, Dr. Cooper was talking preventative medicine back in the 50s, and they thought he was a kook. I mean, he had a very hard time, you know, getting patients. You know, his one-room office off of Preston Road in Dallas, because everybody thought that was just insane. Of course, doctors were also smoking Camel cigarettes, but you know, it was significant because this was a notable, credible association within the United States, and this was a long-term study, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And I can't wait to talk about the conclusions and how this ties all in together here, because, you know, I told you I'm the geek, so I love studies, and I love when you can prove or disprove something.
Well, geeks rule the world. You know, in 1977, Bill Gates was a geek too, and now look at him. So, hey, I just want to remind the folks that are on this webinar here that if you have any questions, you can chat them in. I did get one that just came in. Obviously, everybody that's on this webinar is in a different level of learning. Somebody chatted in quickly the difference between aerobic and anaerobic activity.
Okay, so basically your aerobic activity is that the basic definition is you're using large muscle groups. It has to be a continuous exercise, and you have to use large amounts of oxygen. That's the standard personal training definition of what cardiovascular exercise is. So it's very hard to use a very small group of muscles like the shoulders. It's hard to get cardiovascular exercise with the shoulders because the more or the larger the muscle group, the more oxygen they're going to demand whenever there is any kind of stress that's put on the body. And I mean stress in a good way, meaning that you're running on the treadmill, you're riding a bike, you're swimming in a pool. Anaerobic is going to be your traditional weights. I mean, this is when you are doing contractual exercises. Several different types of anaerobic exercise. Obviously, I mean, there's, from dynamic to static to circuit training to, you know, doing more of a pulse routine versus a traditional or supersetting. And there's lots of different types of anaerobic. But anaerobic is basically your weights. It's your traditional, you know, your traditional. Let's do a bicep curl. Let's do a shoulder press. And cardiovascular or aerobic activity is using large muscle groups, a continuous motion, and there has to be large amounts of oxygen being utilized.
That's awesome. Thank you for that answer, and thank you guys for the question. Let's move on a little bit and talk about continuous capillaries and their relationship with Alzheimer's disease.
So this is really the nuts and bolts of why I am so passionate about talking about this disease as a vascular disease and not a neurological disorder. So endothelial cells within the central nervous system, and we already said that the central nervous system is the spinal cord and the brain. You know, they are found in these specialized continuous capillaries. That's a nice way of saying that you have a very high concentration of them, and they're all going to specific areas of the brain. So they are feeding nutrients, feeding oxygen, feeding pathways to specific areas of the brain. And you know, and they're very there's not a whole lot of room up there. When I say that they're densely packed, they're very, very densely packed, and that's what the second part of that sentence is they're bound together by tight junctions. That's the best visual that I could give. If you were looking at a brain and you took away the fats, and you took away, because the brain is essentially made of DHA fat. So if you were to take the fat away and you were to pull out these individual life-carrying veins and capillaries and such, you would see that they're very, very tightly packed in there. They're very, very tightly packed, you know, they have, their permeability is very, very restrictive. The characteristics of these are very, very restrictive, and to understand that the more healthy an endothelial cell is going to be, the better that the communication is going to be, the more oxygen, the more nutrients. All of this is going to operate at a higher level, which means that not only are you keeping those brain cells active, but you're keeping them active at a very, very high level. You know, one of the main characteristics of dementia in general and Alzheimer's disease is that it is so progressive. It's kind of that slippery slope. Once it's started, once it's diagnosed, you know, it was once thought that there wasn't much you could do. It was about trying to get as much quality in while the person had functionality, instead of keeping the functionality and trying to improve that functionality, not being, how can I say, static in what functionality was there, but really trying to expand that and having the person function at a much higher level, which, you know, then you're talking about expectations. And traditionally, you know, most people, if they hear they have Alzheimer's disease, it's like a death sentence. That's, you know, it's oh my God, it's almost like hearing the word cancer, which isn't necessarily a death sentence, and neither is Alzheimer's. It's all in the way that you're treating us, and really what you're doing in the preventative years. You know, right now, you know, I'm in my mid-30s, and you know, it's about what I'm doing now and not waiting until my 70s. It's about being proactive and taking those preventative steps, which is why I'm so absolutely passionate about the endothelial health, cardiovascular health in general, and making sure that the functionality stays at a very high level.
Well, Danielle, I hate to be the Grinch here, but I have to jump in and take care of a little housekeeping, because some of you that have just joined know that we're actually hosting this webinar in Dallas, Texas, and we just survived a really interesting storm that came through here. Some people have chatted in that they have lost Danielle. I know almost everybody on here still has her, but some people chatted in saying we have lost Danielle. If that's the case, call back in. Simply hang up and call back in. You should be able to reestablish that. I know the phones are really crazy in Dallas. And I also want to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded. So if we cover an area that you just didn't get, or maybe got distracted or had to let the dog out or whatever, you'll be able to listen to this at your own time as many times as you want, because it's very important. And for those that just joined us, we are talking about Alzheimer's disease. It's a very, very ugly disease. When you establish the fact that it is not necessarily only neurological, but also vascular, then you are now empowered to know that you can not only prevent it, but you can take control of your destiny in this area by doing all the right things. And we're speaking with an expert in that area, Danielle Girdano, the president of Define Your Health, Sculpting and Nutrition, who is an expert in this area. So if you have lost this from audio-wise, call back in. Is that okay, Danielle? Didn't mean to lose your train of thought, but I just want to make sure that we got everybody taken care of okay. So we mentioned preventative steps. Let's talk about some of those, and what guidelines would you give for those looking to prevent these issues, or at least slow the progression of the disease?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, really at the core is exercising, physically getting out and exercising the cardiovascular system, and keeping that endothelial function as healthy as you absolutely, positively can. It's absolutely crucial. I would recommend, at a minimum, cardiovascular exercise should be completed 4 times a week, according to the individual's heart rate reserve in a written cardiovascular prescription. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, you know, a lot of people know that I'm a bike rider. I love to ride a bike, right? I can get on a bike and I'll ride for 10 hours on a bike. Well, my heart rate reserve might be much, much higher because my resting heart rate is much lower. And it does not take, or my heart works at a very efficient level. So it takes a whole lot for my heart rate to rise versus someone who maybe has a sedentary lifestyle, maybe works a 9-to-5 job. We're all behind computers so much now these days. Maybe just walking up a flight of stairs will shoot their heart rate straight up through the roof, and they're doing a relatively small amount of activity in relation to what I'm doing. So the heart rate reserve is basically the number of beats per minute that you can manipulate the heart rate to achieve a desired outcome. Now, everybody's outcome could be different, but I guess my point in driving this home is not everybody can just go get on the elliptical and stay on there for 10 minutes and, that's going to make an impact on the heart rate reserve. It might for 2 people, it might not for the other 3 people that are inside the gym. So knowing what your heart rate reserve is and knowing how to utilize that heart rate reserve in a cardiovascular prescription that's specifically written for the individual is key. And doing that at least 4 times a week, getting up and moving and getting that energy to the body, re-energizing the body. Anaerobic exercise. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for those that just chatted in, how can I find out what my heart rate reserve is? Oh, we will tell you before this webinar is over. Sit tight. So keep going. Another thing that I noticed you mentioned, Danielle, is, and this is awesome, somebody who's listening to this thinking, well, gosh, I can't afford a gym, or I can't go because I'm a single mom and I have to put kids down. At least you can do something. Is that what I'm hearing from you? Doing something is better than doing nothing.
Absolutely, and I think the greatest example of that is, one of the specific groups that we work with are paraplegics. And if a paraplegic can do cardiovascular exercise, I guarantee anybody on this call can do cardiovascular exercise. It might need to be done very specifically, but there are ways to raise that heart rate, and there are ways to get it up. Yeah, absolutely. There is no excuse, as I say.
And Danielle, of course, we need to talk about a very, very nasty word that most people don't talk about in public because it's taboo, and it's the S word, and you know what I'm talking about. That S word that gets censored all the time, sugar. What are your thoughts?
Sugar. I personally think that sugar is probably the most addictive drug that is available. I think that children get addicted to it very, very early. It sends off the same pleasure zones in the brain as gambling or sex addiction or illegal drugs. It's nasty once people have an addiction to it. And when people go through withdrawal, they go through the same type of symptoms. I mean, headache, shaking, fatigue. Some people will go through sweat. Some people, it depends on the severity of their addiction. But in the United States, we're eating an average of 150 pounds of sugar a year. That's absolutely just astonishing when you think about that. And sugar is definitely one of the biggest dangers for endothelial function and for letting that endothelium heal and being able to, function at a high level. Again, talking about Alzheimer's disease as a vascular disease is very, very different than what most people have ever thought or heard or had conversations about. And simply taking the sugar, and don't get me wrong, oranges have sugar, apples have sugar, plums have sugar. The body is going to metabolize that type of sugar much differently than sugar beets, which, is, I don't want to get on my GMO, my GMO bandwagon, but sugar beets. And getting, corn, a synthesized sugar that's made from corn, high fructose corn syrup, corn starches, all these different types of sugar that is very highly addictive and that we're just getting drones and drones of. And let me make one point here, and this is something that I do want to make a point of. Some people say, well, I drink Diet Dr. Pepper, I drink Diet Coke, I drink Diet Pepsi, I drink Diet vitamin water, I drink whatever it may be, but You know, there's this awful thing called aspartame, and if there is another topic that I am just absolutely passionate about, it's aspartame. You heard me relate to sticky plaques a little bit earlier in this webinar. Aspartame is a form of sticky plaque. What you have to understand is when you intake aspartame, your body cannot purge it. There is no way for the body to purge it. Now, sticky plaque specifically is stored in the brain. And the link between Alzheimer's and many different forms of dementia and aspartame are undeniable at this point. And you know, as much as you know, a lot of food manufacturers want to kind of steer the ship, you know, it's absolutely a fact. So sugar is absolutely the bad guy. If I have to point a finger to a bad guy. But you can't replace that Pepsi with a Diet Pepsi or that Dr. Pepper with a Diet Dr. Pepper. You know, you need to really understand what you're eating and different names. I mean, an example of this is there are over 40 different names for MSG that manufacturers use, that if people read the side of an ingredients label, they'd probably be shocked. And sugar is starting to fall into that same category where there are just multitudes of different names for it. So,
so what I'm hearing from you, Danielle, is the second thing that we can do. The first thing, obviously, exercise. Do something. You can do it. Number two, would you say that it's fair enough to boil it down to 3 words? Read that label.
Yes.
Read the label.
Yes, read the label and understand if you can't pronounce the word or if you don't know what the word is, your body's not going to either. And I think that's crucial. You know, unpeeling your food, not unwrapping your food, as I like to say.
Well, before time gets away from us, let's finish up some of the preventative steps that people can do. Talk about the L word, the LA word, and the LC word. From a novice here, I'm not even sure what that is. Help us to understand.
Well, first and foremost is, you know, supplements are one of those things that run rampant. I mean, everybody has the magic fix and the magic pill and the magic, you know, this and that. And if anybody knows me, they know that I am not big on pushing supplements. I'm not. If you can get your nutrients from food, I suggest you get it from food. There is one supplement, though, when we're specifically talking about endothelial health, and we're specifically talking about trying to increase the functionality of all of that vascular system, whether it's specifically the brain function in the vascular system or the heart and the lungs and everything that goes into the traditional thought pattern of the cardiovascular system. And it's a supplement called Pro-arginine. And what I like about this, first and foremost, it's the only L-arginine supplement that mixes L-citrulline. And what's so important about that is when you mix these two together, it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly, right? When you were a kid, the greatest sandwich in the world was peanut butter and jelly. And if you had just jelly or you had just peanut butter, it just wasn't the same. These guys are power partners. That's the best way that I can explain it. On their own, they're great, and they have different functionalities. When you bring them together, they become a powerhouse. Now, there's 20 amino acids total, and that's what these two are. These are both 2 amino acids. So there's 20 total that have ever been discovered, and 10 are considered essential and 10 are considered non-essential. Now, the non-essential is what's made by the body. The essential is what we need to get via our diet. L-arginine is one of those ones that after someone gets through puberty, the body drastically reduces production of this to the point that many people simply stop production of it. L-arginine is the best friend of the endothelium. That's what helps repair that sugar damage. The average American diet, obviously, they need to. The endothelium is screaming for please help me, you know. And L-arginine is that. Now, there's 3 different ways where you can get L-arginine. You can get L-arginine through bovine hair. You can get L-arginine through algae or through corn. This particular Pro-arginine supplement, and I have to caution people about buying something on the internet, or, you know, there's one supplement that I saw that they test with mouth strips or something. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't test that through saliva. and people are so quick to jump. This particular one is the only one that's in the physician's desk reference, which any kind of a supplement being in the physician's desk reference is significant. You're talking about basically the doctor's Bible, for lack of a better term. It is also coming from a non-GMO organic corn source. France and I believe Sweden is the other country where it comes from. And now you could eat corn from France and Sweden, but to get the amount of L-arginine that you would need, to help that endothelium, you'd have to eat a whole lot of it. And when I mean a whole lot of it, I mean hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds to get it in. So, talking about sugar, obviously, corn is a type of starch, is a type of sugar. And so when it breaks down into the body, getting that extracted from that source instead of actually eating that corn makes a whole lot of sense. Now, the one thing I will say that if anybody is specifically interested either in the heart rate reserve or this supplement, the Pro-arginine, both of these have to be specifically prescribed or specifically suggested dosage for that particular person. You can't say, oh, well, Danielle takes, and I actually myself, I personally take 2 scoops or 2 dosages of Pro-arginine every single day. I have for almost 2 years now. I've seen a lot on the athletic performance side of how it's helped me, but it's in the back of my mind now that I'm using it as a preventative measure against Alzheimer's. It's specific to a person. So just because I'm taking 2 doesn't mean that Steve takes 2. Well, maybe Steve needs 3. Maybe Steve needs 4. Maybe Steve only needs 1. Maybe he only needs a half. So I would just, I would caution people if you are interested, especially in this particular supplement, please email me or please call me. Don't go rogue out on the internet and just go Wild West on it. Please contact me. I'm always open. My email box is always open, and I want to help people. I mean, my passion is to help people and to help them live longer and stronger lives. All my contact information is listed on this same slide here. Our Facebook page is another great tool that people can use for bite-sized pieces of information. And also the Cardiovascular Wellness of Chicago, that's one of the advisory boards that I sit on. There's also a Cardiovascular Wellness of Dallas. Both of those are great resources. There's a couple of other cities around the country as well. There's one in St. Louis, there's one in Tampa, in Denver, and just an excellent resource. But if you have questions, please don't go rogue on this one, guys. Just give me a phone call, drop me an email.
So, folks, this is what I want you to do. 2 things right now. 1, scratch bovine hair off your Christmas list, because if you're thinking about handing out bovine hair to all of your relatives to get them healthy, don't do it. Check into Pro-arginine. Find out if it's right for you, and here's how you're going to do it. Contact Danielle. Let her get you some custom information, spend some quality time with you. I must admit, she did with me. We sat in front of I think it was a Jamba Juice or something like that. She looked me in the eye. She said, Steve, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to die. She gave me a custom plan. I dropped 20 pounds within a couple of weeks. It was awesome. She can do the same for you. Get a pen right now. Write down this email address. Write down this phone number. Go to her Facebook page and like that page, because daily you'll get some great information that can help you not only in the Alzheimer's area, in total wellness, total health. That's what she's all about. And lastly, I just want you to know one thing. Talking about something is another thing, but you can either be a part of the problem or a part of the solution. If you would like to do something for Alzheimer's, here's the information on the Alzheimer's Cure Foundation. Go to their website, alzcure.org, and they have a Facebook page also, ALZ Cure, and donate. You're thinking, well, I don't have much money. It doesn't take much money. How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. You can do some amazing things by just doing what you can do. Do what you can, and the rest will take care of itself. Before we officially say goodbye to Danielle, this has been awesome. I do want to give you a preview of coming attractions. This is the first of 3. We are going to be doing another webinar next Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, where we're going to go into a little different area. We're going to be talking about DHA fats. Now, this is not a pool player from Minnesota. This is a thing, and the DHA fats affect on Alzheimer's disease. You're not going to want to miss that. You're going to want to definitely be here. We'll send you out the information. Join us. Danielle, thank you. Thank you for what you do for other people. Thank you for what you've done for everybody that's been on this webinar. Do you have any parting thoughts before we go?
You know, I really can't say enough about the Alzheimer's Cure Foundation. If you guys have never heard of them before, they are an amazing group led by an amazing founder, and their goal is to raise $20 million for the research group or scientists who do discover a cure for Alzheimer's disease for those that are in the latter stages of it. They're absolutely one of the most progressive, innovating, really trailblazing groups out there that are really trying to do something very, very different and really trying to get at the core of what the issue is and trying to really push it. So I implore you to go check them out. Amazing, amazing, amazing group.
Awesome. Folks, thank you very much for your time. We ran slightly over, and thank you for your patience when we had some of the technological issues. Join us next Monday night at 7 o'clock, where we're going to talk about DHA fats, the effect on Alzheimer's. Is all fat bad? Not necessarily. Come and find out. Danielle Girdano, thank you, the president of Define Your Health, Sculpting and Nutrition. To all of you that are on, thank you. We'll see you next Monday night right here.